Behind us, we have 40 years of unbelievable success if we look at international trade and business. As you all know, it started in the beginning of the 80s, basically 1982, when China slowly opened its door to the West. 10 years later, the USSR imploded, not exploded, and a number of new countries were formed. And in parallel to that, India started to cut its ties to China, to Russia, and joined the world economy. In effect, 3,300 million people joined the world economy in a very short time. This is, of course, something that never will happen again, for the simple reason that there are no more 3,300 million people that can join the world economy. The name of the game, ladies and gentlemen, you have all heard that word, was globalization. The world as a marketplace, the world as a playground, an open world. Furthermore, a democratic world, it was argued, was there for the foreseeable future. It was even taken so far that the American philosopher, Mr. Fukuyama, argued that it was the end of history. Market economy, trade, democracy in a beautiful mix. Today, 2023, when you and I meet, we all know what happened. Things started to come to an end 2019 in Wuhan, China. A virus, COVID, a global pandemic, and a couple of months later, planes on the ground, borders closed, and you can all remember that spooky time, because indeed it was spooky. When we thought it was all over, a war in the middle of Europe again, and we have to go back to the Second World War to find something of the same order of magnitude. A pandemic followed by a war, and in the backdrop, a climate crisis. Whenever we human beings are exposed to crisis in our small life, as well as in business life, it serves as a little bit of an acid test. Do things function properly under pressure? And the answer was, well, in some cases, yes, in other cases, no. And we could see that supply chains that were built up over those 40 years of internationalization, they were not really what we expected them to be, at least not under this pressure from a pandemic and from trade restrictions. These smaller worlds, the oligons, will of course not stop trade or stop business. It will just reorient the unit of analysis. We will trade first and foremost within our own smaller world, for the foreseeable future at least. We know from history, ladies and gentlemen, that men and women in business are usually the ones that break new ground and expand the world. And that's exactly what we did for 40 years. We expanded the world and we traded with each other in a way that lacks historical comparison. But now I would say that we again move into a stage where we reduce the space. The world is becoming smaller for the foreseeable future, and we will trade with our neighbors. I come from another small country, Sweden, with a lot of international trade, and we know from research that business, even in a highly internationalized country like Sweden, 70 to 80% of the trade is still today with neighboring countries. It's our European partners that are important in the portfolio of Swedish trade. Even if we have been through a stage of globalization for 40 years, 75% of the international trade, both import and exports, is to 10 or 12 neighboring countries.